Now, while Drake, OVO, and all of their fans may have thought they were so up when SSS for You dropped, what has now become clear is that as the streaming numbers are coming in for this record and we are seeing how this thing is performing, that despite people initially lining up to hear the return of Drake when this came out, a lot of those people listened just to see how bad this record would be, as they have not stuck around for repeat listens, because when it comes to how Drake's SSS for You album is performing, it is way below what anyone would have projected, and because of this, Drake, PartyNextDoor, and everyone around them is spiraling, because they never thought they would see a day where their music is doing so bad. And now, before we go any further into this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And just as I said in my last video, the Drake fans are still very mad at me because they don't want you to hear the truth I'm about to tell, so please be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps me out a ton and it is more needed than ever. And so now when it comes to Drake and SSS for You, beyond hip-hop or anyone else's opinion for that matter, when it comes to the fall-off that we have seen in Drake's career and the shift that we have all been talking about that has been going on in hip-hop ever since Kendrick Lamar won the beef, there is no debating what's actually happening anymore because we now have numbers to truly see how this album from Drake is doing. And when it comes to those, they are genuinely just terrible because compared to every single Drake album since the last decade, this project didn't just have the worst first day streams by far with only a little over 56 million. But compared to the last Drake album, For All the Dogs, which had 108 million opening day streams, that's almost a 50% decrease in the amount of people who listen to this new album. And I mean, no matter what you try to say about this, there's no way around the facts. This is just terrible. And what is so funny is that after Drake tried to use these same number games on his diss tracks to dismiss Kendrick from being on his level, and overall from trying to prevent himself from ever being rivaled by anyone, he has now lost this game so much because not just right now is Kendrick Lamar's music, which has been out for months, still outperforming all of the new songs from this Drake album, because when you look at Not Like Us and Luther, they are still comfortably doing better than this entire new album from Drake, and even with 21 new songs out from it, Luther is still projected to take that #1 spot on the charts over every single one of them, which between this being a Kendrick song, and of course because it's a melodic driven one that does such a better job at being an R&B song than anything on Drake's new record, it's really just so funny that this is the song specifically that is finally gonna become a #1 record right now when Drake is competing with it in so many different ways. And from this to the fact that with over double the catalog size and a new album out, Kendrick Lamar is still outstreaming Drake, and he is just breaking all of his records, which is gonna end up giving him the ultimate title you can get in this era, as Kendrick Lamar will be the first rapper to ever reach over 100 million monthly listeners. And just the fact that Kendrick has never compromised his integrity to do this, and he now has almost over 20 million more monthly listeners than Drake has ever had in his peak, I mean, that is just surreal. And whether you want to talk about quality, impact, or just resort to numbers, Kendrick is really the greatest in any way you want to put it. And to quote Kendrick Lamar in his Super Bowl performance, what this is all showing is that no matter how Drake and his people try to rig the game, they just can't fake that influence. And now even if all of this makes Drake fans want to admit that Kendrick Lamar is winning too much and that nobody can compete with him off of the momentum of the Super Bowl, I mean, even beyond the current king of rap, this album is still flopping when you go down the list of top artists right now, as again, from big names who just dropped like Bad Bunny, who is still outstreaming Drake in total, to somebody like The Weeknd, who made sure to let the world know that his new album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, still had the biggest streaming debut of the year so far over Drake and Party's project, which once again is just showing how beyond Drake and Kendrick, Drake is losing to so many other artists right now who he tried to diss, and when you compare Hurry Up Tomorrow, which is an amazing record, to SS for You, I mean, it's no surprise why this thing outperformed Drake's, because in every single aspect possible, this R&B album is an early album of the year candidate. And now beyond really who are arguably the biggest artists out right now in not just Kendrick but also Bad Bunny and The Weeknd, if we look down the list and really figure out how bad Drake is doing even more, his numbers are not just down for his own standards or when you compare them to the biggest stars out, but now so many other rappers and the recent work they have released has passed him by far, as compared to a record like Tyler the Creator's Chromacopia even. That record opened up with over 80 million streams on its first day, and with only 14 songs compared to Drake's 21, which makes a huge difference, as the whole idea behind making an album this long is to make sure those streaming numbers stay high up in the first place. And even despite how now multiple West Coast rappers have Drake wiped down as from the quality to the impact, and again, the thing Drake has always claimed, which are the numbers, even Tyler is winning against him in every single category now. Even beyond this, if we compare Drake to rappers who are decades into their careers like Eminem, his last album outperformed this Drake and Party record, and even funnier than this, and just putting into perspective how much of a low Drake has reached. If we compare this collab album to another collab in Vulture's One, which had no support from the industry and was actively being prevented from staying on the charts and performing well, that still ended up outperforming this record from Drake and Party, and it did so for multiple days. And so really just putting into perspective how bad this album is doing. As the second day streams for this record were even worse as they decreased and were now in the 30 millions, it is showing just how bad all of this is going, especially when you consider that a record like GNX actually increased in streams on day 2 and got over 74 million. And so overall, what we can see clearly is that Drake is no longer competing with the top rappers and artists in general. And even compared to legacy acts, no matter where they stand in the industry, he is not even outperforming them. And so overall, when you actually find albums that Drake can stand next to in terms of their performance, he is now off the A-list or any top list that you can put together of the biggest acts in music, because when you consider that the album already on day 2 is now doing this low, and Kendrick Lamar's old music is still outstreaming it with ease, because really, GNX currently, which is so deep into its release, is still doing more than this. All in all, in a music industry where when something is new, everybody talks about it and tunes in because they are interested, what we are seeing from this is that Drake is really at a point where there is just no interest in actually listening to what he has put out, maybe beyond a quick first run through. And I mean, even compared to other albums that we have talked about that have came and went, when it comes to SSS For You, this album is just bad, and really in this era in the worst way possible, because aside from one song where Drake raps, the performances are just so devoid of anything that they are not even worthy of being talked about because they are so forgettable. And I mean, when it comes to Drake trying to put out a record in this time that can compete with everything in the industry, even for his new standards where the bar has already been so low, deciding to make a record with this boring of music, especially after coming off the Kendrick beef, was one of the worst choices he could have possibly made, because really the only difference between this album and For All the Dogs is that while both are terrible, at least on For All the Dogs, for the purpose of making an album where people would talk about it, from the features to all of the disses and along with all of the other things he was doing, while the music was not good, Drake at least knew how to make conversation about his music no matter how good or bad it was. But here, the music is just so lackluster that beyond saying that and looking at its impact and effect on Drake's career like we are now, there is just nothing to actually make you think and talk about the greater portion of the music as a whole. And so with all of this, it's truly wild to say, but it's looking like Drake's run and everything he has ever represented really is over, because he just doesn't even have the ability anymore to make the masses want to listen to his music, because even compared to someone like SZA and the Lana Deluxe she put out for SOS, even a deluxe of an album that dropped years ago was able to outperform how this record did. And now with Drake losing to every single person pretty much who ever tried to create a problem with him, it's really just so telling about the moment we are at as a whole. And now as this record really has no popular songs so far, and again, the only conversations being had about it is how the Drake era is over and how bad and boring the record is, and there is nothing further going on, when more numbers for this album come out and we start to see how this thing ages, I am sure it's all going to get even more terrible. And while Drake fans and OVO are definitely going to try to deny the reality we are seeing, and they will make their same old excuses to defend the guy, which we are already starting to see, and with the narratives that are trying to get pushed, it really is just as bad of a way of taking an L as we saw when Drake lost to Kendrick but did not want to admit it with The Hard Part 6. And so all in all, when it comes to the failure of this project, and really, I mean, if you compare this release to when GNX came out, if you're really into hip-hop and music, you can tell the difference of when an actual album comes out that commands the attention of everyone in this era, and when something as ridiculous and forgettable as SSS For You does. And so overall, while Drake fans are going to deny just how bad the downfall of Drake is in this time, and they will continue to make every other excuse for him than just admitting that the music is lackluster, right now we are currently seeing, and we'll only see more, that with this album, it's not just going to be the biggest flop of Drake's entire career, but it's going to be one of the biggest moments in hip-hop and music history in terms of when everybody realized for good that an artist's run is over. And so now with all that said, let me know, What do you think of the numbers Drake has ended up doing with this record? Are you surprised by how bad they are? And what do you think is going to come of this as we see just how terrible this all really is? And now, if Drake and this album flop as bad as it is looking right now, do you think that there will even need to be a debate anymore on if he has had the biggest fall off of all time for any rapper, period? Because if he really does flop as bad as these numbers are looking, I think that's the conversation that we are going to need to have. Now, I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and if you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. And now, if you want to see how making this album even more lame, Drake delivered some of the worst disses on it to both Kendrick Lamar and Joe Budden here, which have made his downfall really just seem all the more embarrassing, check out the suggested video.